Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you a book review from the Slappy World book series, and it's book number 14, Fifth Grade Zombies. I have to say, I'm slightly disappointed with this book. From what we got announced 10 months ago for this Granny Z and this really creepy concept of a story, to the end product here that was rewritten literally a few months before release, it just bogs this story down into mediocrity for me. This book is not spectacular by any means. It's nowhere near what I thought it was going to be initially. And I can definitely kind of draw some comparisons here to some of the more average or slightly below average original 62 books for having that 1 month time crunch. And I hate to be so critical on new books here, but when they announce them 8 to 10 months in advance, and then they do a last minute rewrite like this on top of it, this is a big no-no to me. Like, I wish they did not pull this often in Goosebumps. Surprisingly, it does happen. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen here and there. This is one of those situations where it did happen, and unfortunately, I can definitely see a lot of issues in this story as, I guess, a result from the last-minute rewrite. But I think it's good. I just don't think it's great or spectacular or anything, but it's not bad. Don't make it sound like I'm trying to say it's a bad book. No, I actually think it's a good book, but it's not one of the greats. So let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. So this kid named Todd, he's from New York. His parents have to travel out of the country on business, and he has to take a bus to visit his aunt and uncle and his cousins and stay there for about a year, which he will spend his entire 5th grade year at that school. And they live in this farm in Wisconsin, in this really small town where nobody can see the town on the map. Give you kind of an idea. Todd has FaceTimed his 2 cousins, Mila and Skipper, many times on his cell phone. So he's comfortable with them. He has an established relationship with them. So hopefully moving there won't be too bad. It'll be kind of a change up from New York. So while on the bus, Todd pulls out his harmonica that he likes to play, and he thinks he sounds good. And he really upsets the bus driver, the bus driver promptly yells at him saying that you're a bad harmonica player. You should quit playing that. You're going to wake people up. And once Todd kind of gives some back talk to him, Todd gets kicked off the bus, basically. But luckily, it's at his actual bus stop he needs to be at. And as you'll learn throughout the story, Todd is kind of a kid who likes to backtalk people. He's very stubborn in a way, and kind of shines through his character, being his main personality trait. But when he gets off the bus, his aunt and uncle are there to greet him, and the bus driver makes a funny comment to the uncle saying, this kid can't play harmonica. And, there's some comedic elements dealing with the harmonica throughout the story. But nonetheless, Todd rides back home in the truck to the small town farmhouse where his family lives, which is actually a really nice house than what he thought it would be. He thought it would be like this really old, rundown, like white, paint falling off the house kind of situation. But the house is kind of like a mansion almost, with beautiful fields of corn throughout the property. And he runs into Mila and Skipper. Mila is his age. She's also in 5th grade. But Skipper is in 8th grade. His voice is changing. So he's kind of going through puberty. And he's kind of a troublemaker. And he likes to haze Todd. And throughout the first couple chapters of this book, Skipper is hazing Todd. And Todd is getting kind of scared being there. And Mila has to come to Todd's defense, saying, Skipper, why don't you mature a little bit? And why don't you stop messing with Todd? So Mila tries to help Todd by giving him a tour of the cornfields in the backyard. But when Todd goes back there, he hears whispers while in the corn stalks. To paint a picture of the time of year, the harvest had already happened, summer is over, so it's kind of in between summer and fall. And it's kind of cold outside, and the wind's usually blowing in Wisconsin around this time, according to the book. I mean, I know some people live in Wisconsin that are watching. You could probably attest for this. But Mila assures Todd that it's probably just the wind. And when he comes back inside, he's kind of spooked. He's trying to get people to believe him. And Fortunately, Skipper comes and apologizes to Todd and says, "Hey, look, I'm sorry for all the things I did." And Todd says, "Do you know about the whispers?" And Skipper just ignores him and shuts the door. So Todd is spooked. He has no idea what to believe. So he's like, "Well, now I gotta get somebody to listen to me because I swear I heard this. They keep saying that I don't know what I'm talking about." And Todd's not the kind of person to let people tell him what he thinks. He's very opinionated. He's very stubborn. He's going to stick up for what he thinks he knows and how he feels. So the story jumps to another situation. Basically, this story spends about 18 chapters doing this. I call this like the setting up the cornfield arc, and then it kind of changes after that to a completely different thing. But later on in this 18 chapter arc, Todd looks out his window one night and thinks he sees something coming out in the cornfields. So he opens up his window and climbs out into an old tree. Lo and behold, this this is actually probably a bad idea for Todd, because now he gets some type of confirmation that there's something in the cornfield, and they look to be human arms and human bodies crawling out of the ground. He can't believe his eyes. He needs to go down and see and inspect to make sure that he wasn't seeing things. And he sees holes of dirt. And he's like, all right, here's my evidence. I know there's something in here. I finally have evidence. So he goes and tries to wake up his aunt and uncle and his family. Says, hey, look, there's I think zombies in the cornfield. I need you guys to come out and look. There's holes there. And they're talking about how, raccoons make holes in the ground and how it's probably nothing. So Todd feels defeated again, but he's still adamant that he needs to convince them what happened. So then it cuts to a point where Mila finally introduces Todd to this girl named Shamika, who lives about 5 miles away on the nearest farm. And it's revealed to Todd early on that Shamika may or may not have a crush on him, think he's cute, since Mila showed pictures of Todd to her, say, hey, look, this is my cousin Todd. He's going to come staying with us for a year. So Shamika shows him around her farm, which is like this really cool, up-to-date farm with modern technology, a bunch of chickens, stuff like that. And when he meets Shamika, Mila and Shamika are like whispering, and Shamika's like, hey, did you tell them about the missing field trip class from Ann Arbor, Michigan? And Mila's like, be quiet, don't say nothing. So Todd starts to put two and two together that maybe Mila and Shamika know the truth behind what's going on in the cornfield. So he asks them to, so what's going on? They change the subject, and the story hits another brick wall for Todd. Luckily, or I guess unluckily, the story kind of jumps into the school arc, where Todd officially starts school. He's starting 5th grade. He's attending 5th grade with Mila and Shamika. Those are some people he already knows, his cousin and his cousin's best friend. So he's, kind of wary about going to this school, but at the same time, he's like, I don't think it'll be too bad. The teachers appear to be nice. He gets a nice classroom with a window view. They have lockers in 5th grade. It's very weird. It's kind of like a similar setup to a Spine Tinglers book I read called The Dead Kid Did It. It's very reminiscent to that in a lot of ways as well. But while he wants to go out and get something from his locker, he's not really supposed to be there, but for some reason he's checking out his locker. He sees out the window a bus pull up, this creepy, rusted out gray bus with kids coming out, hobbling, wearing hoodies, covering their faces, and they get privately escorted into the building. Now this creeps him out. He's like, who are these kids? And they're told, the teachers pull him aside and said, hey, you need to get to class now. You shouldn't be out here. And when he looks over at the classroom, he sees the classroom number is called 5Z, and these kids are basically thrown into this classroom. Now, the story basically goes down this idea that, Todd goes back to the cornfield by himself, and he discovers the bus in the cornfield. He gets freaked out. These zombie kids basically do exist. He thinks that there's zombies go into his school, and he's down to prove it. One day he sees a couple of people in like weird suits bringing canned meat, which I don't want to spoil the whole canned meat thing because it kind of spoils the ending in a way. But they're bringing canned meat into the classroom. And when he goes into the classroom to kind of see for himself once and for all if the zombies are going to school here, there's a big revelation that happens. And you don't really see this coming at all, but it makes kind of sense. And once this revelation happens, Todd basically, it goes downhill from him for him from here. They basically the zombies basically chase him out of the class, scare him to death, come clean. They tell him too much, now they have to basically turn him into a zombie. Luckily, his cousin comes to his rescue, but there's another revelation that happens, and then of course the very ending that happens. And all I have to say is it's one of the more comical endings, but it makes sense, but it's not great or spectacular by any means. I kind of don't like it at all. It's like, it's almost anticlimactic in a lot of ways, and that's how the book ends. So in a nutshell, that's basically 5th grade zombies. I don't want to spoil the whole canned meat revelation thing because there's a lot I can spoil with the end, because it's basically the most active part of this book. The strengths on this, it tried to develop atmosphere throughout this book, and as you'll read, this book does develop some pretty serious atmosphere, and it has some legs going for it. The character, Todd, he has this, he's kind of witty, but he's not really that smart, but he does have the stubbornness to kind of make him stand out and give him a little personality. You know, the whole Skipper hazing him is some comedic relief. He does have, you know, his own unintentional funny moments throughout this. This story is pretty funny. You will laugh at a couple things. Some really cool modern pop culture references, like with Minecraft and FaceTiming. I liked that aspect to it. I like that twist to a Goosebumps book. If you read a lot of the older ones, they're kind of missing that element, but in here it's kind of prevalent. And I like the setting of the farm. It's kind of creepy. You don't really know what's going on in these cornfields. It's very like, what is it, Signs? Have you ever seen that movie Signs? It feels like that almost. Like I imagine that in my head going on. But the negatives. The negatives. Okay, for starters, I don't want to spoil it, but the zombies, when they're revealed to be who they are, the location of them living in the cornfield seems kind of redundant in a lot of ways. I didn't touch on this in the book review, but there is something that gets revealed by Todd's aunt to him about there being a law that all kids have to go to school, and that is the mandatory law in the town they live in. And that kind of plays into it. It does offer its disturbing element, and it kind of makes you feel perturbed in a lot of ways. But at the same time, there is no origin or reason how they became zombies. None at all. And it just says, it literally says they don't know how they became zombies. They just are zombies. And that's kind of annoying to a book that builds up like 18 and 19 chapters of setting and getting you invested into, you know, what's going on with these characters, and then it just drops the origin of the zombies on its head like that. That kind of makes me upset in a lot of ways. It very much reminds me of Trick or Trap, with that whole revelation about the villain, how they just kind of treated it as wish-wash. Same thing here. The ending itself, it's very comical and slightly stupid. It makes sense, but it's not my cup of tea. I am not a fan of the ending of this book. And all the best parts of this book had to deal with the zombie classroom, the room 5Z, and you maybe saw 2 scenes with 5Z throughout the entire second half of this book. I mean, nothing really memorable here. It's very unmemorable in a lot of ways. That's also another drawback I have with it. I'll probably forget this book after I read a few. I'll probably forget everything that happened in here. So from a 0 to 5 stars, I knew I was not going to give this thing over a 4 at all. Not even close to being a 4.5. So it's going to be lower than a 4. I did, however, think that since it had some originality going for it in some areas, like with the idea of the law keeping kids in school no matter what, and the whole like zombie farm type of thing. There was some originality to it, and Todd did feel like a sort of original character in some aspects, but in a lot of ways it did kind of feel like a retread of, you know, Werewolf of Fever Swamp, Fish Out of Water story like Werewolf Skin, and Scarecrow Walks at Midnight. It just felt like a lot of those stories as well. So for it being, you know, just bogged down with problems, I still thought it was good, so I put it above 3.5. Where I settled was about a 3.8. I deducted basically a full point off for the lackluster second half of the book. It's setting up all it's set up, and it just dropped it on its head at the very end. No origin for the zombies, the lack of care to provide origin. The twist was pretty interesting, I have to say. It does kind of ramp it back up, but then it falls back down at the end. In my opinion, I think it just ramps all the way down and kills the steam. It's very anticlimactic. And I deducted 0.3, I guess, for kind of like the ruse of a story that it was. it was sold to us originally to be something, and then we got something like this. I just gave an extra 0.3 off, honestly, because the book was announced 10 months prior, and it just hit as low as it did for it being 10 months in progress of making this book. I deducted 0.3 because it had some extra, you know, uninspired issues like taking elements from other stories and, you know, rushing the end and all that. I just deducted an extra 0.3 because that was just an extra slap in the face to me. But it's not a bad book. It's still good. I gave it a 3.7 out of 5. Pretty average. So yeah, that's my thoughts on 5th grade zombies. Let me know in the comment section if you have read this book. Did you love it or did you hate it? I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.